The mayor of Kansas City is here, Quinton Lucas, joining us on KCMO Talk Radio and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. The big news that came out yesterday, two guys are now in custody. They have been charged with a shooting that injured a half dozen people last month at Crown Center. Brian Favela, 22 years old, and Jose Olivas, 24 years old, charged with 26 felony counts in connection with that shooting at Crown Center from mid-January. Mr. Mayor, good morning. Thanks for joining us as always. Do you feel like maybe with, unfortunately, some more attention on some of this stuff as of late, suddenly it seems like there's a little more movement from the folks in charge of prosecuting? Do you feel like that's a good thing? Is that your interpretation of what's happening here as well?
I think what I would say is this. We know that lawlessness cannot be tolerated. We've had a few pretty notorious incidents of late, and I think everybody in the criminal justice system and process on the whole recognizes that the city needs to be a safer city long term. And so I will agree with you in this sense. I don't think it's accidental that in the same winter, and even though it wasn't really covered that much, that you see a proposal that increases police salaries by 30%. You see, I think, fairly tough prosecutions against a number of people involved in these cases and ongoing and exceptional work done by our police department and our investigators in all of these mass shooting scenarios where you are getting charges and serious ones. And so I expect that to continue. I expect that to continue with the next prosecutor starting early next year. I commend our current Jackson County prosecutor and her assistant prosecutors for, I think, bringing very serious and numerous charges against the men involved in the Crown Center shooting, and I expect more of that to happen as we go into the warm weather months.
With this prosecutor's race, as you noted, open, we had one of the folks looking to replace the current prosecutor, John Gromowski, on yesterday. Someone who's in your office is also running as well. Do you, and I asked you this a few weeks ago, but with everything that's changed over the last few weeks, do you plan on endorsing in this prosecutor's race?
I don't know. I mean, I have respect for everybody running. I've had the chance to get to know Mr. Gromowski, who I did not have that much of a relationship with before. I certainly know Ms. Johnson, who's in my office. I know there are a few others as well. My view of the world is this, that we need to get a clear answer as to how we will be serious and tough on prosecution, how we will make sure that there is a close working relationship with all the police departments, of course, but in particular interest for me is the Kansas City Police Department. And frankly, how we can make sure, as I've said in recent weeks, that punishment is swift, certain, and severe. Now, you can't always guarantee the certain. That's up to American juries and those sorts of things. But you can certainly look to some of the swiftness and the severity that you're seeking. And so I look forward to learning from all of them. And on the prosecutor's race, I actually think most of us in Jackson County are actually of the same mind, which is that you do want to make sure that you are seeing prosecution happen where it needs to, where you're seeing good conversation, where the public is saying, you know what, we believe that if there are people who are doing either very serious things or not so serious things, these people are being brought to justice. And so what I'm going to look for, and probably would take some time until we get later in the summer, is to say who is making that point clear and who will keep that closer collaboration I think you're describing in recent weeks going in the years ahead.
Mr. Mayor, there are these two individuals who have been charged with these felonies from the Crown Center shooting, that they were affiliated with a group called the 9th Street Mob. It's a gang that operates an East Side neighborhood of Kansas City. That problem in particular, I know you're not in law enforcement, but you're on the Board of Police Commissioners, so you know more than the average citizen does for sure. Has that crime mentality through these gangs, has it gotten worse in the last couple of years in this town? And if so, why?
The gang conversation, and I know it was a subject of much discussion in recent weeks and all the debates over terminology as well as other things. What we are seeing on gang activity by and large, and I think I can share some of this, is that you're getting different types of factions. And so many of us probably know the more infamous Bloods and Crips and ongoing battles of large gangs that almost have a nationwide, if not global presence. And you still have some of that with drug trafficking, particularly for Mexican cartels and others. What we're seeing, particularly with younger and younger people, is these street-based groups, and it's why you've heard that term. It's not to modify the language. It's that they're getting this smaller focus. And so probably some of the greater threats you're seeing is this, that, yeah, there are neighborhood-based beefs, almost in a traditional sense, these neighborhood-based beefs that continue to escalate and go on through years of battles back and forth. And they're looking to hit each other wherever they can find each other, be that at a shopping center, outside of a school, walking down the street, at house parties, and almost anywhere. And that's something that is growing. At the same time, you are seeing younger and younger and younger offenders who are armed to the teeth, who have no regard for the lives of others or themselves largely. And I think that's been your greatest risk. And so you are seeing both the smaller gang, lower level gang activity. I think you are seeing more young people who are just angry at one another. And you're getting that terrible cocktail of both things that are leading to a lot of the criminality that we're seeing that's leading to our homicides and non-fatal shootings each day.
This may be a follow-up separate conversation, but with you talking about the terrible cocktail, I just think about the younger people, the younger kids, mostly younger males getting involved right now. And I think about, just a couple of years ago, everything we went through with COVID and schools shutting down and closures and things like that. And I can't help, just as a regular guy, sit here and wonder if the lack of attention on young people during those couple of years could somehow factor into some of these kids ending up in some of these gangs, groups, whatever you want to call them, on the streets. Have you thought about that? And if so, what do you think?
I have thought about that. I think that is an intriguing point, because there's this general theory, and won't surprise you that I disagree with it. There are people who say the reason for lawlessness now is because, right, there isn't enough jail space, there are all these other issues. And maybe that's part of it, but I think that's thinking about the 25-year-old offender. If you have a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old, some of whom are the ages of people that we have arrested for offenses with firearms, some for murder, some themselves who have been murdered, that type of person is actually making these choices for, I think, a different reason. They were 12, right, back during COVID. And so what gets them? They weren't actually thinking about consequences. Prisons probably aren't a reality to them any more than what fatherhood might mean in their lives or anything of that sort. They're just kids living. And I think it is fair to say that, and this isn't necessarily for the better, so much of our social safety net for kids in America and in a lot of our not just our inner city schools, but increasingly some of our suburban ones that are having more and more challenges, is that school is where you get fed. School is your social world. School gives you all of your structural supports. And to the extent that they lost that in 2020 and perhaps never regained it, then you're having this issue where we have a lot of boys who ain't got no manners, who have no real home training, who have nothing really that is persuading them to be worthwhile or to value the lives of others. And so actually I do entertain that as an idea. And I think whatever it is, we need to find some way to try to address that fairly quickly. Because I know last year there was this discussion from some American cities about how they saw their homicide numbers drop. Our city didn't. We were like Dallas and Washington and not. But a lot of those same cities, and I checked these numbers, are finding themselves at an uptick right now too. And so what that tells me is there is something that is more broadly national. There is something that got into our batch of 12 and 11-year-olds 4 years ago. And I do think it's fair to say, well, was there something with our COVID response and perhaps failures to address traumas, household needs, anything like that, that have led to this kind of lasting impact of folks who don't really know how to engage in pro-social behavior?
Mayor Quinton Lucas is on KCMO Talk Radio. On another note, on a brighter note, of course, yesterday here in town, the Chiefs rolled out their renderings for what they want to do if the 3/8 cent sales tax does get passed on April 2nd. You saw those for yourself, of course. We know this is tied to the Royals potentially moving downtown. Is Mayor Lucas, I mean, listen, we know how you feel about this, I think, personally, but in an official capacity, will you be advocating on the yes side of this out of your office? I did an interview with some Crossroads people yesterday who were asking that same thing, official versus unofficial. I think that, and for this very simple reason, I think keeping two professional sports teams for a taxpayer value of less than $1 billion is actually a good one.
And I know others would say it seems like so much. In Nashville, the public investment is $1.5 billion to keep one team, the Titans. In Buffalo, it's $800 million for one team, the Bills. In Las Vegas, is about $800 million for one team, the Raiders. And, of course, the A's are trying to get a similar deal. You just don't keep this level of professional sports competition in communities like ours without some level of investment. And for both teams to be at a much lower figure, I think that that's worthwhile and worthy of a yes vote. I do think things will change as time goes by in both plans. I have said before in terms of the Royals downtown plan, I love downtown baseball. What I will say to everybody who's having issues with it is this: the Royals are moving downtown, or they basically are not playing at Kauffman Stadium in 10 years. So you can say, I don't care if they move to somewhere else. I don't care if they're playing in Kansas. I get it. Just making clear that the vote isn't to keep the Royals at Kauffman Stadium, because I think they have pretty clearly said they will not play. Then you see the Chiefs rendering yesterday that basically tears down the stadium and has new parking lots and new fan experiences. And so I'm likely to be a yes vote on the stadium issue itself. I think there's going to be a lot more work in terms of what it looks like, how we engage, in terms of what the rollout will be on those stadiums, how they look, how they're interacting with businesses nearby.
All right. Well, Mr. Mayor, we'll pick up with that, I'm sure, and much more happening in town next week. We always appreciate your time here on KCMO, and we'll talk to you then. Have a great day.
We'll see y'all.
All right. That is Quinton Lucas on KCMO.